Welcome to the February meeting of the Municipal Housing Trust Fund of Amherst. Why don't we begin by approving or reviewing, commenting on the minutes? Any comments? Alex, please.
Yeah, I had two. First of all, I was here at the January 9th meeting, and I wasn't listed as a trust attendee.
That's not
And the other one is a language thing, but on the first page, down under the housing needs assessment, end of the second paragraph, it's talking about LLC transactions, and it says indicating a potential trend of LLCs. I move that we strike that last clause, the indicating a potential trend, because the data we looked at was point in time data and can't actually be used to establish a trend because we didn't have longer contextual data to pair with it.
Okay, good feedback. And thanks for catching that error. Anyone else spot anything? Well, can we have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected by Alex's comments?
One, two.
Or are we all in favor? Okay, so done. Minutes are approved. Thank you, Greg, for keeping them up to date. That is a thankless and essential task. So thanking it.
And Alex, sorry about that. That's me going too quick on those. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I don't think I said anything last meeting. So especially if you were just looking at a recording or transcript, it'd be easy to miss. But I wasn't tapped there.
I recall you. So okay.
Yeah.
Well, now we all have a reason to check to make sure we're not getting erased accidentally.
We don't get left out.
Do we have our guest this evening in the audience?
We do. And Jesse, hopefully you can hear me, and I'm going to go ahead and promote you to a panelist now. So prepare for incoming video, I guess. And I think you'll have to accept something in a moment. And welcome Grover as well. I'm going to put Grover into panelist mode as well, one of our members. And I'll also welcome to our audience, Maura Keene is here as well in the audience, trying to name who's around. So Jesse, welcome. I'm pleased to have you here tonight. And I told Gaston I'd just do a quick intro. So as part of our strategic plan as the trust, or our action plan, I should say, we talked about sort of strategic engagement with other boards in town and trying to be intentional about that. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that in a low-key way. So Jesse Major is here, and Jesse, I believe you're the chair of both the planning board and also the housing subcommittee, if I recall
just
correctly.
the subcommittee, so don't give me too much credit. Yeah,
gotcha. Okay, well, we'll give you lots of credit regardless, but we're happy to have you. And the planning board currently has recently, in the relative recent past, launched a subcommittee explicitly focused on housing. And so I thought there's a natural sort of match there to the housing trust to some degree. So Gaston and I agreed it'd be great to invite Jesse, and we're lucky that you graciously joined us. And I know you're also in the academic world in your day job, but we appreciate you doubling down here as a volunteer beyond your existing substantial commitments as a volunteer. So welcome.
Thank you.
And if there's key details about you that I've left out, you're welcome to share as well. But
Sure. Hi everyone. I only know Carol, and great to see you again. It's been a while. Nice to meet the rest of you. Yeah, so just a little context. I joined the planning board, I guess, a year and a half ago. And it's been on my mind for quite a while. I've lived in Amherst for 18 years. I live on Cosby Avenue, which is right downtown. I'm sure you're all familiar with the streets. I work at UMass. I'm a professor there. I'm now also Associate Vice Chancellor for Research. I have two kids who go to UMass. I raise my kids here. I also own 2 other properties in Amherst, which I rent to individuals. So I'm well versed, I think, in all of these issues that all of us are talking about. And really the whole reason I was convinced to get involved with the planning board was to try and save our neighborhoods, in my view, like to figure out ways to facilitate year-round residents over increasing flipping into student homes. And I say this as much as I can. I'm not at all opposed to students. They are my livelihood. Like, that's obvious, right? And I have great neighbors who are students. There's nothing anti-student. It is completely pro long-term resident, the things we're trying to do. And particularly poignant in my neighborhood, which is the sort of Sunset Lincoln Historic District, this trend of just the percentage of rentals is just increasing. Sorry, of student homes, not just rentals. And I'm really worried, as are other people, that we're going to reach some tipping point, and it's already happening. People will move out. Long-term residents are moving out because they don't want to be surrounded by student homes. And so, again, this was my whole motivation to try and get involved, to see what we could do, if anything, to try and work sort of against this, right? It certainly overlaps, I think, with the work you all are trying to do. It's just to make more affordable possibilities in our town, right? And it's the same issue that I see also, because the student market drives things up so much that even a couple young professors can't really afford to live downtown, right? And that's what we want to try and get ourselves back to that place. So yeah, for the year and a half, I've been working on this. It's been up and down in my frustration and productivity level feeling, because, as you all know, I think better than I do, this has been a conversation for 30 years in our town, and not a whole lot's happened on this front. The kinds of things, so we've bantered around a lot of different ways. There are ways that other towns in similar situations have tried to regulate. There are minimum distance strategies. There are minimum unrelated occupants in a house. There are simply defining and limiting the number of rentals per neighborhood, per town, whatever, all kinds of strategies. And what we realized sorry, let me back up a little bit. We formed the subcommittee, or I formed the subcommittee, because there was never enough time in the regular planning board meetings to talk about these issues. Never enough time, and maybe not enough appetite among the full board. And so I was encouraged to start the subcommittee, which we started maybe 7 months ago. So there's 4 of us on the planning board who try and have somewhat regular subcommittee meetings to sort of pick issues to work on, to then bring them to the planning board to hopefully move that forward to town council and CRC. And you guys know the whole process, which I don't need to elaborate on. And yeah, so in the subcommittee, we've talked about all kinds of things. What we realized a few months ago was, to do any of this, we first need our town to adopt a definition of a student home, because without having a way to sort of define what we're talking about, there's no way to try and address it, right? And again, because we want to distinguish between student home, which is we view as short-term residents, or 9-month residents for 4 years, most typically, versus year-round potential long-term residents. And in order to make any kind of distinction like that, we really need this definition to get on the books somewhere, right? And the first opportunity that came up is really around the recent ADU law change that was a Massachusetts thing, that we're trying to now add in this definition in a sort of twist on our own ADU bylaw. And hopefully that'll be at planning board next week for discussion, if you're interested to chime in for that. Beyond that, we're also trying to just gather a lot of data about where rentals are. The permitting system in town seems to be pretty good, but it's never going to be 100%. There's clearly a gap between how many rentals there are and what's actually showing up in the town records, or who actually gets a permit. But my guess is it's 85 to 90% correct. And we are currently really thinking about overlay districts, as I'm guessing you've all heard. The first of these. This is a full planning board effort. Also, the University Drive overlay seems to be moving forward, at least making its way back to council soon, hopefully. The next thing we're thinking about are increasing density at already zoned for apartment and multi-use properties. So like there's a big stretch in North Amherst, just north of the university, that we're thinking about trying to increase density. And again, it's not a new idea. This was raised 12 or 13 years ago as a possibility to, as places to really increase density for student specific housing. And so we're going to try and push that forward at some point. And then there's, talk for a while about East Amherst Town Center, sort of increasing density there, and some other little pockets where, a lot of people imagine would be great places to increase density rather than just relying on neighborhoods to absorb and increase density that way. Yeah, I don't want to forget, and we can come back to this if you all have other specific questions. As I joined, you were talking about LLC data and trends, and I've been really interested in that also, just as an argument to make. And so I just received 20 years of sales data from the state. It's in an atrocious format, which I'm trying to get through. But that's exactly what I'm hoping to point out also, is that these sales are a one-way decision, right? They're never coming back. And my preliminary searching indeed backs that up. I couldn't find a single sale from a LLC to a single family, to a single owner over 20 years. So that's pretty compelling. And I'm happy to share that kind of data with whoever wants to look at that with me. But anyway, yeah, maybe I'll just stop there and see if you guys have questions or specifics or.
Great. I'm sure members have lots of questions. So who wants to start off? Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Jesse. As full disclosure, I'm a newer resident of Amherst. I've only lived here for a couple of years. I myself am a UMass grad student. I know that I've mentioned this to the whole committee, to our committee before, but I really often hear this claim about students infiltrating into single family neighborhoods. I would love if you all are working under this premise that you share some of that data as you get it. Obviously, using LLCs as a proxy for that is rough. There are other reasons that single family homes can be owned by LLCs. Last I looked, in like as of 2023 data, it was like less than 3% of single family homes in Amherst were owned by LLCs, which is actually not a very high percentage. So if that's going to be the foundational narrative for some of these larger conversations, I'd love if, as you have that data, you can share it with us so we can all be operating from the same shared understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. It's agree. I agree. It's a little complicated, right? Many reasons an LLC might have property. There's also trusts. There's all kinds of different language or names that get put onto properties. So that's one source of data. Your comment about the overall percentage is totally valid and spot on. I think we also need to consider, so I've been trying to map the locations also in a digestible way. And this is one of the first things I did when I got on planning board was I tried to come up with percentages rentals by neighborhood because there's extreme differences. And so, my neighborhood and then north of Amherst, I can't remember the numbers. It was like 30 to 40% non-owner occupied properties versus many of the other neighborhoods in Amherst, which are, 5%, 10%. And I think we need to treat them differently, at least from the work we're thinking about. We'd love to get to that point, but I totally agree with you. We have to have sort of substantiated claims like that. And yes, I'm absolutely happy to share. Like I said, what the state sent me was every transaction has like 6 lines in an Excel file. And so there's no easy way to sort of sort it and compress it and then do anything reasonable counting wise, but I'm working on it. But yeah, absolutely happy to share.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Hi, Jesse. It's good to see you. I'm glad. Thanks for being here. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about what you said you want the town to adopt. Step 1 is to adopt a definition of student housing. And I wondered if you could say a little more about what that would look like,
Sure.
what you're looking for in that definition.
Yeah. So I'm on a different computer, otherwise I bring up the text. But basically what it comes down to is a student home, and we're trying to be really careful about the words we use, right? So a student home is defined as two or more persons unrelated by blood or marriage who live in the same dwelling, who are attending colleges or universities. Pretty straightforward. And there's a lot of twists and turns on it, right? And this is we basically took the definition from State College, Pennsylvania, who's had this on their records for 10 or 12 years. And we assume it's been challenged legally. We can't see that anywhere, but it's clearly held up for them. And so we're trying to take a very similar approach. And again, it's not to put the definition in, we don't see as a negative. We see as a way to collect data, and then a way for the town to intelligently make decisions based on the conversation we just had, the percentages and neighborhoods of these student homes. And if as a town we decide, okay, we're okay with, Sunset Lincoln becoming 80% student homes, fine. The town should decide that, but it should be an intentional movement, not letting investors decide, right?
So let me just make sure I'm understanding. So if somebody is in college as an undergraduate and stays as a graduate student, and as long as they're enrolled, it's still a student home, no matter how many years it is.
Correct. Two or more persons unrelated by blood or marriage in the same dwelling.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Grover.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I have a number of questions about this. One is, I guess, how in the world would the city track blood for what?
You break it up, Grover.
Yeah, sorry, Grover, you're breaking up a little bit.
Person. Sorry.
Grover, maybe why don't you turn off
I'm
your
a queer
video?
person and okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a queer person, and only very recently, like my kids were born, and then I could marry my spouse. So just hearing the definition that way, knowing, I mean, for one, gay marriage might go away, but it just, I'll just say to you, since you're here and able to hear me, that language concerns me. And I also just, how do I say, like when my kids go to Fort River, and a number of the parents of kids in our kids class are graduate students and many of them are immigrants who are here for maybe 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. And so I just have a concern about using student housing with this definition is also in some ways a proxy for other kinds of exclusion.
Yep.
Considering who gets to stay long term and who is newly arrived. So voicing that, I'm just curious, I'm curious about if the student housing designation is actually solving for what needs solved for. And if something like the number of homes that we want owned by mega corporations versus small homeowners, and something else, or if it should be based on conduct, right? Because is the challenge that you don't want neighbors who are a different age and culture than you, or is the challenge that people are like on their roofs urinating and loud in the middle of the night? Because it seems like that is an actually solvable problem that doesn't ride over fair housing law.
Yep. I very much appreciate your comments. Most of these are things that we have discussed. There's a few things that I would say in response. The first is again, our motivation is not at all to be exclusionary. It's really to be pro long-term resident, whatever that means, right? And how the definition gets used, we battled with the definition because we anticipated exactly this worry from people, from some of us on the committee too. Like, is this just going to be a vehicle to use this in an inappropriate or discriminatory way? But there we at least we haven't yet come up with a different way to try and define what it is we want to limit, which again is the percentage of student homes in neighborhoods. It's not about behavior. We're not trying to use this as a way to curtail behavior. It's not about not enjoying students as neighbors. It's about retaining neighborhoods where that encourage young professionals and families who might want to live here long term. But again, and we're very open to continue to work on the language if there are suggestions from really any aspect.
Thank you, Jesse and Grover. Allegra, please.
I guess my question would be kind of how this has played out in State College and what benefits they've seen from having this kind of designation. And I guess certainly I hear Grover's concerns, and I think, we want to be very careful right now, especially with everything that's going on with this incoming administration, to not exclude or discriminate against neighbors based on a certain category that they might fit into. But I would be interested to see kind of what the benefits are, because
I agree completely with what you're saying. I think the benefits are giving the town either zoning or planning board or whatever body's going to try and essentially regulate this number of student homes a tool to do that. Because if you just say rentals, that's not what we want to do, right? We want to encourage rentals from long-term residents. We want to bring the rates down so that's possible. And it's simply not possible in our town at the moment because it's so lucrative to rent to students, right? And because students are not a protected class, it's an avenue we can pursue to try and do that, right? But yes, it's thorny. I totally agree. And maybe this isn't the right wording, maybe this isn't the right definition, but we're trying to come up with something. The benefits from State College, they, I believe, have done similar to what I was just saying, is they have this definition and they have different zoning in different areas that say, okay, this neighborhood can be 80% student homes. This neighborhood can only be 20% or whatever, right? So they've used it as a tool to help decide intentionally as a town where they want to house this large population of temporary residents, right? Who again, it's not a negative, it's just, it changes the town, changes the neighborhood in terms of commitment to upkeeping a property, in terms of making long-term relationships, in all the ways you can imagine. And, anecdotally, McClellan Street, which I think you all know, around the corner from me, when I moved in here, probably the first 6 or 8 houses from town coming down McClellan were student homes, fine. Now it's slowly moved down toward Lincoln. And just 2 years ago, I'm forgetting the number, I think 48 McClellan maybe, sold and is becoming a developed, like 2 4-unit houses. And on both sides of that, the long-term residents who've been here for 15 or more years are moving. Right. So it's just, that's what happens. And that's what we want to figure out how to push back against. And we're not convinced that this is the only way to do it with this type of definition, but we haven't hit upon any other strategy that we think might be a good tool.
Thank you, Jesse. Alex.
Yeah, I will try to keep my comments brief on this one. I guess thank you, Grover and Allegra, for bringing up what I think are important issues. I was sitting here like trying to wrap my brain around case law that I knew. The one that's coming to mind is Belterre v. Boris, which basically allows legal discrimination against rentals to students was essentially the case. I think I'm still frustrated with hearing this for a couple of reasons. For one, the town plan in the town manager goals talks about wanting to foster a really healthy top-down relationship. I think one of the ways that can happen is through encouraging long-term permanent residents to be involved with institutions of higher learning, including taking classes, not necessarily towards a degree program, but just towards like education and lifelong learning. I'd be concerned that the definition as presented is very, very vague and would allow somebody to be classified as a student household if they were two retirees who were living together but not married and taking a night class at a school, for instance. I'm also frustrated that this seems to, I suppose I'm not mentally squaring the difference or the distinction that I think you're trying to make. So please enlighten me if there's something I'm missing here. But saying you want to encourage new residents and you want to encourage long-term residents, but then this is a classification that feels like it can be used to prevent people from moving to town. And I don't hear anything on the other side of encouraging people who come to town, whether it's to teach or to study, to stay and to become year-round long-term residents. I've worked at town summer camps. I know other people in the group have more educational experience in the town than I do, but a lot of especially graduate students do have families and are a very vibrant part of the town. So I'd be concerned that if you're trying to say there are whole parts of town where people can't live purely because they're students, it's going to lead to worsening relationships between towns and universities, and also is going to overall just hurt everyone in town. So I suppose I'm looking for more information here if there's something you can share.
Yep. I to be honest, I'm what the right word is, not enjoying, but I'm very happy this conversation's happening, right? Because this is the kind of feedback we need. And this is the, like I said, we anticipated a lot of this initial response, right? And I don't have all the answers to things you just raised. What I would say is the primary way we can encourage long-term residents, year-round residents, is to have affordable rents. The reason we don't have affordable rents is because there's so much money to be made renting to students. I get 4 calls a week from cold calls from investors asking to buy my properties. I'm not being hyperbolic. Like, it happens regularly. And so, I mean, I would ask you, please tell me another way to try and address this. I don't know what it is other than to stem the flipping of long-term resident houses to student rentals, right? There's zero intention by us for this to be a tool to be exclusionary. I mean, I gave the example of neighborhoods with some percentage and some other percentage. We have no idea if that's the way the town would want to go. That's not our goal. Our goal is maybe to figure out maybe it's a maximum percentage per square mile. Maybe it's a distance between rental homes. We don't know how to use it quite yet, to be totally honest. We don't know what will work here. But I understand your concerns 100%. There's another point I was going to make, which I'm forgetting. I'm sorry. Maybe it'll come back to me.
I guess the point I would make to us as we keep asking questions is to differentiate the ends from the means and be clear whether it's a question about the end, which I understand Jesse's working towards, which is basically to prevent erosion in these neighborhoods towards student rentals from where they are. So that's an end. And so we may disagree, you may disagree with that, and we should be clear about that. And then there's a question of means. If the end is agreed to be erosion, then what are effective, justifiable means? Carol.
Yeah, that's a good segue into what I was going to say, because I don't agree with the ends. I don't think I do. If the people who you said someplace between your 2 houses or something, just it's going to be redeveloped and it's going to be 4 apartments. If all those 4 people who lived there were students, but they were good neighbors and they took care of the neighborhood and they participated in things, what would be wrong with that? I just don't get it. I feel like a lot of the impetus for this comes from students who are not good neighbors. And of course there are some, but it's not all students. Not all people who've lived here for a long time are good neighbors either. So I just feel like something's screwed up and students are taking the fall for something else. That's my honest opinion.
I appreciate that. And I don't entirely disagree. And again, it's not, I have student neighbors. I have no problem with that. It's that I also really enjoy having 10-year relationships with my neighbors. I think that's how we keep a town vibrant, is people who are going to be here, who are going to go to restaurants in the summer, who are going to have kids to go to school. We just invested in the library. We just invested in the school. We're not going to have people to use these things. I mean, how many vacancies do we have in town storefronts? I think that's because there aren't enough people who live in town, walk to town and go shopping in town. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's sort of what I've seen over the last 18 years, right? Again, it is there's nothing motivating me that's anti-student. I can't say that enough, and I don't know how to say it differently. But I do think there is a real difference in what someone who's here for 4 or 5 or 6 years brings to our town than someone who's coming here to planning to be here for a long time.
Thank you. Legra.
So I guess part of me is like, okay, well, town gown relations seem to be really tipping in the favor of gown getting what they want and not necessarily town getting what they want, which is again, why I wonder like what more could UMass be doing to be housing their students on campus more so? I mean, I went to high school here, moved away for a while, came back to raise my own family, and like I drive past friends' houses from high school, which are clearly now not families living in them. And it does change the landscape of the town. I mean, but I feel like when I was in high school, which was in the early 2000s, there was a lot more thriving storefronts happening. I mean, there were the carriage shops, those are all gone now. And there's a big building that costs a lot of money to live in. And so I think that the relationship between students and town residents needs to be good, but I think that I would continue to argue that like the university needs to pony up a little more and do better for its students and its staff in terms of housing, because I do think that it's expensive to live here. Not everybody who works at the university has a great, wonderful salary. There are people who are, making minimum wage and working, as, custodians or food service workers that aren't getting like professor or chancellor pay. And those people might want to live here too. And perhaps putting a little bit, I think the town gown needs to go both ways. And I feel personally like the gown is winning in the town gown relationships in terms of like a lot of those things. So I guess I think that I see both sides. Like I don't want to be discriminatory, and I want neighborhoods to be thriving, and I want people to be able to live here. And I think that there's a lot of other stuff going on in the budget in town that's making people have pause about, okay, we had this great reputation for schools, and now we're cutting millions of dollars each year and losing all these positions. And how else can we attract people to live here if there's no affordable homes, there's no good services, and there's, I think it's really a struggle right now. So I don't I will just say that to say I think it's a complicated issue, and I do think that I understand the need for both town residents and students to have safe, affordable options for housing. And maybe we do need to look at other ways to define that. So, and Brent.
Yes, thank you. You just summarized a lot of the complexity. I totally agree. I'll add 2 points. I'm not here representing UMass, so I'm not going to speak to that. I will say 2 weeks ago, there was a announcement about a long-term housing plan that the chancellor's initiated. So we could read about that. The other thing you reminded me that I meant to say earlier was we talked a lot about taxes and how maybe we could use that towards this end in terms of who owns properties and having different tax rates and stuff like that. And that's all gets into like, I mean, you all might know more than I do even about the way taxes work, but that was sort of a non-starter because when I first started thinking about it, that seemed like a really easy way to distinguish, meaning a company versus an individual who owns a property. Maybe we can distinguish that way, again, with the whole goal of figuring out how to reduce rental rates on some properties in town anyway. But that whole thing turned into a real non-starter and just went nowhere. And again, that's what led us back towards trying to define, who by who's in the homes.
Let's keep the questions coming, but maybe before Jesse has to go, we can ask about the development opportunities that he mentioned, which is, something that addresses all these concerns if we can pull it off. Grover.
I just wanted to note that it seems like this solution is trying to solve a problem of greed, essentially, right? Like it's like the people who are buying single family homes to charge as much as they possibly can for a room are charging students who can't really afford it. They're likely going all to their student loan debt, and then raising prices so that everyday working families can't afford it either, or edging them out of the market. And I totally feel that and see that, and creating more exclusions or restrictions on the students who ultimately pay a very high price to live in. Like, they are also experiencing this hardship because we don't have, as a town, don't have what everybody needs. It just seems like pretty unfair to those students, and it won't ultimately solve the problem. It just will make more students housing insecure. It'll push people further and further out to the margins. We don't have a transportation system right now that can accommodate people from the margins to come in. And I just noting that it just doesn't seem to solve the problem. And you said, we want solutions, and the solutions are like, what if we were more hardline with the investors and the LLCs, or what if we had strategies that invested in more land trusts so that the homes were permanently affordable and they couldn't be owned by an LLC, right? Like, there are strategies, we know the strategies, or even the investing in the ADU that you can rent out to one set of grad students while a family that's living here long term can stay. There are options on the table, but they require our town and our partners to hold the university accountable, and the landlords, put some boundaries on them, and not just because it's the easiest to restrict students, is what it sounds like it is.
So yes, I would love to do everything you just said. I would also point out that I don't think I said anything about excluding anybody from anywhere. I understand that's a reaction and a worry with this kind of idea, and I'm open to the conversation. Yes, that's where I was headed with taxation, right? About landlords controlling landlords, but basically there's nothing we can do legally on that front, is what I've been told. I'm not a tax lawyer. I don't know, but basically that went nowhere. I think part of the solution, and this getting to Gaston's point about development, is we also just need 5,000 more beds in town. And that's what will really reduce the market pressure. If we could have that tomorrow, I would abandon all this talk, right? But that's a 10-year prospect, maybe. And that's why we're working on the overlay districts to try and increase density intentionally in places where we believe the town, it's a good fit, near services, on bus routes, all the things where you'd want to have denser living. And we're trying to approach that in a way of not only benefiting a dense student population, but also benefiting long-term housing residents as well.
Yes, until we have more housing, it is a zero-sum game. So it's either the students who lose out or the other residents who would live there. Erica.
I just want to say, Jesse, I so appreciate you coming and talking to us, because we've been talking about the elephant in the room for the longest time, which has been students in UMass, and not the students, but UMass more so. I think, I can never get an answer of how did UMass make a decision to allow sophomores off campus without the town being involved in that decision. It was just one policy issue that has a huge impact on the town. But for me, I think, certainly my colleagues, their concerns about a definition is important. But I think what I'm hearing you say is you're trying to figure out a unit to see in terms of density, and then make a decision or think about policy that could include us, or could include the housing production plan, because it's also looking at this in terms of where best to build to increase that 5,000 bed space, and to make sure that all of our different areas in Amherst are not negatively affected, but we all share the responsibility in increasing bed capacity and trying to increase affordability for families. So, I mean, I'm a little concerned that, we're sort of reacting towards you versus working with you, because I think we need to work with you to find a best solution, because we've been discussing this for as long as I've been on the trust on how to manage this. And again, I agree with Allegra, the town, as far as I've seen, and Paul's not here to obviously defend himself, I have not seen the pressure from the town on really pushing UMass to take more responsibility, or to come to the table and make some, concerted decisions together. And we've tried to get them to come here to talk, and they've given us some lines, but it hasn't really gone very far. So this RFP does sound great, but hopefully the town is involved also in thinking about this RFP. And I think we should continue our dialogue together, and maybe we can find a better definition. But we're looking for units to figure out, what are the units of students living there? What are the units of families living there? Some of them are student families who are going to stay here long term, all of that. So the last thing I just want to say is, I was a grad student who came to UMass, and UMass did not have any place for a family. We're a family of 4. And so we had to find a place off campus. If there were more places for graduate families, it would have been great to live on campus. And I think there are a lot of students who would like to live on campus, but there aren't options either. So again, I think there needs to be pressure on the university.
Thanks. I would just say I'm happy for the pushback, and I didn't anticipate this would be the main topic I might discuss with you, but you're not going to be the only group who's going to react this way. So we, again, I'm happy for this to be a dialogue. I'm not offended. I think this is great. And we need to hear all this, and wherever this idea goes, there are going to be people who have the same reaction. And I would just hope to have the conversation and try and convince you of what we're actually trying to do is not exclusionary.
Thank you, Jesse. Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. I apologize if I am being defensive. It's obviously a touchy issue for me personally, and I appreciate you being here and having this conversation with us. I was going to say I would love to have this conversation continue into the future, and working with your subcommittee more closely would be fantastic. Thinking about actionable steps beyond just sharing data, as we spoke earlier. I would also love to know if your subcommittee has talked much about the new rental registration bylaw. I know there's still a lot of questions about how the town is going to be implementing that and the extent to which they're going to be implementing and enforcing that. But I know that's a new tool that the town has to try and answer some of these big questions as well. So I was curious if you have anything to share about that, or about resources, especially thinking about as we as a trust are trying to encourage the creation of new affordable housing units, if some of them do have a rental component, then this is suddenly something that was voluntary, which is now a mandatory, another hurdle for developers to get through to offer those units. And if you have any clarity to offer us on the implementation of that or resources coming, then we can share it with.
Sure. Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of conversations about the rental registry. I would have to really defer to Rob Morrow and the staff about how it's going to be implemented. I can't really speak to that other than, but I think I know as much as you do. What I would say, and actually I meant to say this earlier, I think in response to something Grover mentioned about whether it's the student home definition or just the rental registry, enforcement, it's a strong word, but enforcement of it is really a big problem also. Like the town doesn't have the resources, frankly. So it's all volunteer information at this point, whether you have even, I mean, we as a town, my understanding is we don't have the ability to find and go after people who aren't registering as a rental, to be blunt. So it's all voluntary to some degree, and any kind of definition we added on there would be in the same situation. So I don't imagine they'll ever get to a point of we have enough person power to go inspect every house in town and say, oh, you have five people living here, we're finding you, or you have to move out, or anything like that. In our mind, it's both of these tools, if the definition becomes real or even just a registry, are a tool to also signal to investors, we're not going to let you run rampant here. Like we are going to try and push back as best we can. And again, towards this goal of essentially bringing rates down, right? I also wanted to mention, I was reminded of another thing related to the ADU. Someone brought up this idea that you could build an ADU and then have a long-term resident in one and students in the other. And yes, we're all for that. The reason this is coming to a head right now around the ADU bylaw is because part of what the state said was we cannot require owner occupancy in order to have an ADU. So you're not, and that's been our main tool in town to somewhat limit rental density, meaning people could build ADUs or second unit, but we were allowed to require owner occupancy. We're no longer allowed to do that, which is why we're pushing forward with this idea around the ADU bylaw, which if it, the whole idea is, okay, you can build an ADU, but one or the other can be a student home, but not both, is sort of what we're hoping to put in with the ADU bylaw, just to fill out that conversation. But again, I'm not sure that's going to work, but that's the idea we're working toward. Back to the rental registry. Yes, I know there's been a lot of concern about it in terms of implementation. We'll have to see how that goes. I know there's 2 more town staff who are going to be charged with sort of doing that. As a landlord, I have no problem with the whole program. I think it's great. It's probably going to benefit everybody, frankly. That's my view on it. Yeah, I don't have much more to say about that.
Jesse, I wonder, among the less explored areas for development, are there any that you are bullish on, you think deserve more attention? Anything that you want to encourage the trust to look at in our mission to develop affordable housing?
Yeah, so I haven't really thought about it in that context, to be totally honest, and a lot of our conversations in the subcommittee, at least, about this issue, we often talk about, well, what % affordable housing do we want to require if we're going to allow more density? And we as a group kind of go back and forth because we don't know what the right answer is. If we're trying to build 500 beds in a certain place that we imagine will really be predominantly students, I mean, you all are probably better suited to tell us what's the right way to try and include some affordable housing in there or not, or should we ask them to offset it the way some of the other projects in towns have done, right? Like the the Hastings by Roberts project just by buying it. That's what, I'd love your guidance on that. Yeah, so not really. I think the University Drive overlay, the full planning board took up like a year ago. We're finally getting to something that I think will go back to council. The first, what we're thinking of as low-hanging fruit are really all the complexes north of campus that are already fairly dense. Like there's not commercial activity there. It's just to maybe change zoning to just increase density a lot in those same places. The other areas that have sort of been flagged, they're a little complicated because we imagine they should be a mixed use type setting and there are a lot more neighbors involved and, it's just probably a slower process. I don't think I really gave you a good answer, but.
No, that's fine. So one point that was raised to us at this recent event about affordable housing was the power of, is it 40R, Greg?
Yeah, I read something about that as well.
You read something about that it basically manages to clear a lot of the obstacles for affordable housing in whatever area of land gets that designation. And I guess, at a minimum, would like to put that on the planning board's radar. And I don't know if that gives you any other thoughts.
Yeah, like I said, maybe Bruce called him. He was just bringing this up the other day, and the conversation didn't get very far, but it's something we were going to bring back to try and think about a little more deeply.
Okay. We gave Jesse a lot of thoughts. His ideas were stimulating. Does anyone have anything else? Rob, do you want to know? Well, we took almost an hour of your time and really appreciate it because we know you're putting this time in with the same ambitions that we all have to make housing more affordable and strengthen this community.
I would thank you for having me. I'll just close with saying one thing or two things rather. I'm always open to more communication. If you have thoughts, please just email me. Find me on the street. I'm riding my bike around town all the time. Also, our subcommittee, we'd love to have you show up and just be part of the conversation anytime. I'm trying to run that subcommittee more as a conversation than a formal town meeting, but we have to follow the laws too. So anyway, hope to see you all.
What is do you have a regular time slot for that?
We don't, unfortunately. I will email you our next several dates and times, and just so you can circulate that.
Okay, and then you should know that we have a development subcommittee, a funding subcommittee, and an education one. And I guess maybe the development one has. In any case, we're certainly happy to have guests at these subcommittees as well.
Thank you. Yes, I'm trying to pick my evenings selectively, but
of course,
you all know how that is. Yeah. Okay, great.
Well,
thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Jesse.
You
Appreciate your presence.
Bye.
All right. That was some good food for thought. We've got a tangle. We've got a tangle of policy issues, and the market keeps coming after us. So I teach my students the coercive laws of competition are always on your tail. Capitalism's always coming for you. What do we have up next? Upcoming some town updates. Greg.
Okay, yeah. So and we'll see, we're at 8-ish here, so I'll try and be modest here. The housing production plan continues apace. Two things to know about. Hopefully you all got CC'd on an invite to an event on Tuesday. That is sort of an add-on in that there's a grad student who's got a cool approach called scenario planning. Alex, she's somebody who is studying with Camille Barcher, so you might know.
Which grad student is that?
She's actually, I think she's technically mostly done. Janelle Franklin, but now McGlasson. McGlasson's her new name. Franklin's her former name. So she and some other students will be largely facilitating that. Barrett will be a part of it as well. But basically, that's an opportunity to sort of like both imagine a little bit and also sort of consider various future scenarios, kind of 5 years out, but especially 10, 15 years out, as I understand it. And then sort of look at different housing strategies against a variety of those future scenarios, thus scenario planning. So that will be Tuesday at Town Hall from 4 to 6. You're all welcome. You should have a flyer in your inbox. Please feel free to share it. Yeah, that one is best to come for the whole thing if you want, but that's gonna be more table-based discussion and then kind of walking around and sharing and whatnot. So that'll be from 4 to 6 on Tuesday. And then you'll also hopefully, I think sometime early next week, we should have as well the next draft of the housing needs assessment, which we all have put some input into. And I think we'll hopefully actually have some more concrete numbers on students. Actually, we did get some stuff both from UMass and I guess Tony kind of sliced and diced on the census stuff a little more. So I'm excited to see what more detail we have there around student homes, student residents, I should say, in the town of Amherst, along with other updates, along the lines of what we talked about. So that's kind of the HPP update. We have also had a few questions about a few different properties that are in the news or, getting discussed a lot right now. And I just kind of put properties of interest to just kind of just be a catch-all there. But so I just want to respond to a few inquiries. So one, a few of you have asked about the Juggler Meadow sort of Kittredge estate, which straddles Leverett and Amherst, and is, I guess, geographically mostly in Leverett. So the short answer on what's happening there in the official sense is nothing, which is kind of the most relevant thing that you all should know. There has been no proposal submitted to the town, nor have we been given a heads up to look for one, at a certain date or something like that. So right, and I'm pretty sure maybe they put some sort of placeholder in with the town of Leverett, but I don't think I don't think it's anything super formal. So yeah, so I know there's been a lot of public engagement on that one, but it remains to be seen whether they can actually, propose something viable, and and if they do, we consider it. I will note just one specific thing I think is worth sharing. Is that I guess it's a developer consultant or whatever has floated 40B as a mechanism. I think based on the numbers, they could technically do a small 40B in Leverett because Leverett is below the 10% threshold. But they would not be free to show up in Amherst and do a quote unquote unfriendly 40B where they just jam it, which they could do if we were below a 10% threshold of affordable homes in Amherst. But we are not below that threshold. We're well above it. So that's not an option for them in Amherst, the unfriendly approach. I suppose they could propose it to the ZBA, and they could come and ask us for support in potential affordable units as a part of that. But neither has happened so far. So nothing really formal there. And then there's been some questions too about Hickory Ridge, and I'm not sure if everyone was here last month, but the official word there is there are no sort of formal plans that are in motion for Hickory Ridge. And we heard from Paul that probably the best thing to do is to pull Dave Zomack into a meeting, possibly of the development subcommittee, where we can spend a little more time and delve a little more. And so we'll hope to maybe do that in the next month or two with Dave. But again, there's not.
If I can just add on Hickory Ridge that some of you may know that John Hornick is a strong advocate for using Hickory Ridge for senior housing. So, one of the questions I think we have, or we would be whether the vision for a fire department, should that be something that were to materialize, is consistent with housing as well? Or if, if not, what are the arguments for one versus the other? And so those are the kinds of questions that we'd like to ask Dave to understand better.
And and as I understand, and I mean, as I understand it, which I think is the deal, a fire department has been, or fire station, I should say, has been floated for that site, but in no sense is that a done deal at all. That's a proposal at this point, that I guess town council officially would be considering it, but it's not like it's been it's not a locked in plan. And then the last thing I will say, unless there's, and maybe I'll stop and ask for if people have questions about specific properties. The South Amherst school site, we have officially released the sort of SWQ document for a study effort, sort of similar to what we did in spirit with the VFW site. So a short-term engagement with an architect or project consultant to vet different possibilities of that site. What is exciting about that is, to me, is that the SWQ requests kind of expressly like 3 different models, right? So hopefully the outcome from the eventual product would be that some architect would give us 3 different schemes to look at as opposed to just one. So it's not going to narrow things. It will hopefully kind of broaden the public imagination there, and also that what is possible. And I think, and apparently that one maybe we're going to need to figure out, like, questions of hydrology and maybe some title stuff. So there's some details to wade through there for that consultant. So that's what I've got on properties. But does anyone have questions about any of those, or can I fill in any more detail, Eric?
Not specifically those, but we've had Strong Street for the longest time in the pipeline, and it never seems to have moved. And one of the questions was, which we don't have to, maybe we can put on the agenda for next time, was, is it time to maybe sell the property and use the money for other things for affordable housing? So, I mean, I'm sure the development subcommittee can tackle that, but it is something that's been on the agenda for a very, very long time. It's never seemed to move forward.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's a good reminder. I think informally, I think it's one of those where it's a small enough property with some logistical issues that I think others tend to subsume it in the attention of staff. But I think it's a good reminder that we should relook at that, and maybe there's a way to sort of just partner more quickly with a smaller entity to maybe do more of a mix or something like that. Okay. So that's property stuff. So then, okay, so if there's no more questions about those sort of more prospective, future, undetermined properties, some updates on current projects that are more formally in our pipeline. I have good news and I have bad news, or good news and blue news, I'll say. So the good news, Valley was with Mass Housing Tuesday, and then again tomorrow, as I understand it, postponed from yesterday. But the initial, they had no questions, which is a good sign on Tuesday. And so all indications are tomorrow should be pretty pro forma. And Jessica emailed me today that she still has her fingers crossed that she'll start construction in April of the Ball Lane Valley Community Homes property, which is super exciting. So hopefully we'll know that a bit more formally after tomorrow, when that final sort of meeting with Mass Housing happens. But basically, when we pumped some money into it last year, that would in turn pushed into these funds they'll hope to hear about tomorrow, which is exciting. That we could leverage that. And then point then the less exciting thing, but to loop you all in on, is the Wayfinders project. They did hear from EOHLC that they're not going to be funded this round, which is happening right now, which is too bad. There is hope that there will be a mid-year round. I think in part because of inflation and stuff, and lots of all these projects that are on UHLC's radar are less understandable to them in this environment. So they're being, I think, a little more conservative this round. There is hope that things become a little more clear and they do a mid-year round, which they don't do every year, but they'll do that. If they were to do a mid-year, it's usually in July. And so if there were one, excuse me, Jamie, I want to say Jamie advised that his understanding is they being well positioned to apply for the mid-year, and if not, to come back and apply next year in the February 26 round. This is something that happens. Most project developers, plan on having to go a couple rounds with the state. We've had some luck in not having to do that with everything in this part of the world, but that is generally you hope to get it on the first time, but you don't plan that formally. So that's the update. I did convert. We did get them their comprehensive permit in a timely way. So that I asked Jamie directly if that was the concern, and it was not, at least as far as his interpretation, which is the best we have to go on. So, so that's a little disheartening, but it's not, it doesn't indicate a critical concern with the project. It's just, there's a big queue at UHLC. So that's questions there, or Erica, was that your hand from before, or is that, I think so. Okay.
Yeah, it was from before. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
It was probably my aura of disappointment putting my hand up.
Yeah. So, and I think, and we'll see, I think probably they're probably weighing tariffs, like nobody can know yet. Everybody knows that will be problematic. Nobody really knows how problematic, and maybe they're hoping to have more of a sense of that by the summertime. So.
Thank you for those updates, Greg.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's it. That's all I have for.
All right. So let's get into I guess what has been going on in our subcommittees and in the forum on January 23rd. First of all, thank you, Allegra, for taking the leadership with Alex, right, on the education group, and making that happen. And it was very well attended for an evening, a super cold evening, and I learned a ton. So why don't we kind of share some of the key takeaways, Alex?
Yeah, I just wanted to take the focus back to Allegra and really thank Allegra. That was her project. I was not very involved in the planning or execution of that.
All right. Well, yeah, it was a good first go for the education initiative. I mean, I'll just jump in and say that I learned a ton from hearing the business folks talking, and they managed to make affordable housing seem very unsexy and boring and hard to make it happen. It's slow and painstaking. Erica.
It was a wonderful forum, so thank you, and thank you, Allegra, Gaston. You were up there. It was really excellent. It was a really excellent forum. And listening to the developers, I'm actually surprised of how much affordable housing gets built with all of the challenges they have. And I just am amazed that these nonprofit developers are so committed to making sure this happens. I'm just really, really concerned about the current state of affairs and the impact it's going to have on affordable housing. So it really puts a lot of pressure on us to put things in pipelines, to really think about stacking things in the pipeline and trying to move as much forward as we can. But it was a really wonderful forum. It was very informative. It was very engaging. Unfortunately, I had to be on Zoom versus being there. So I appreciated our colleagues who were there. I saw Carol and a couple other people, but it was very, very informative and really so important for us to be hearing.
I mentioned one of my takeaways, which was basically the developers telling us, if you want to help us out, give us some 40R land that's decent, and then we can jump into action instead of wading through the permits and a lot of guesswork in the beginning of these projects.
Yeah. I was just going to echo, I think that was my biggest takeaway. That was a new thing that I don't believe I'd heard about before. So I hope that our development subcommittee might be able to look into that. And perhaps our education subcommittee, at least I should educate myself a little more. But I would also like to say, John Hornick and Rebecca Frick from the League of Women Voters did the lion's share of the work in terms of advertising for the event. And I did just want to share with everyone that I think there were about 50 attendees on the Zoom. So it was well attended, not only in person, but also on the Zoom. So I do think as the education subcommittee moving forward, we should definitely think about like strategic partnerships in terms of promotion of materials, because I think that's a pretty good turnout. And I think John was saying it's perhaps comparable to kind of some of the education things that were done by the trust prior to COVID. So yes, I think that's all I had to say.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, more of an information gathering question for Greg. And if you don't have the answer today, that's okay. But I think it'd be at least helpful for me, and I'm guessing for other folks, if we could get it. Is my understanding that the town looked at a 40R designation during 2020, and I don't know what happened with that process, and can't find a super detailed account of how that seemed to fizzle out looking at the records from it. So if you could provide a little narrative about that either today or at a future meeting, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I am aware of that there was a shot at it. I don't know the specifics of what did or didn't work about it. But I'll name that even preceding the forum that we had, we've been talking about a 40R as something that we'd like to insert into the housing production plan as a proposed strategy for the town to pursue.
Yeah, Rob.
Actually, I'm going to address that right now. 40R has been looked at for earlier than 2020. My planning board looked at it a couple of times, and I think what the problem is that we're too ambitious when we start thinking about it, and we try to think, oh well, we need to put it all in a big place. But if we actually target it in small places and tailor the design standards for small places and maybe do a couple of them, the way it works is you can develop design standards and then apply them to various places. But if you make several design standards and apply them in different places, it might work better. So that would be my advice to the planning board and development committee if you're thinking about that. I'm thinking of one property in particular that I would love to use 40R for, but we were discouraged from doing that. But I'm not letting it go. I'm talking about Amherst Community Land Trust. I think if we put that on small properties or small collections of properties rather than zones, we'll do better. And I was also the thing that stood out for me for the forum was the cost to build a unit starts at 600,000 for no matter where you are, what size it is. That's what it is. It's only going to go up from there. That's a lot.
Right, and they reminded us that the building standards, if anything, are much higher than for market rate work in many respects.
Yep.
All right, so, well, if there's no other comments about that event right now, we wanted to see if the group was interested in kind of joining forces to put on an event that would be a kind of educational, interactive, fair type event for ADUs to try to get banks, builders, for people who have developed ADUs in town, and prospective, ADU developers. I mean, homeowners who might have interest together to exchange information, and I guess thinking of something in the late spring to give us enough time. But I'm, the kind of person, I need deadlines to actually kind of do things. And so we wanted to see what you all think about that, and if we can come up with a vision that we can jointly deliver on. Carol.
Wondering how that would or would not.
Could you move your...
I'm wondering, sorry, I keep doing that, how that would or would not dovetail with the town's need to create a new bylaw. Because it seems like however that goes has a whole lot to do with at least what the future of creating ADUs is going to be. And so maybe there's a way to make them work together. I don't know, but that's my concession or concern is how does that work?
Okay, if I can kind of riff off your comment, Carol. One, actually, us saying we're going to do this event might light a little fire under folks. But as I understand it, and others of you please weigh in here, my understanding is that the impact of anything the town does is at the margin, because the state has mandated what has to be the case, and we already have something on the books. So I don't think that my understanding is that most people who would want to develop an ADU will know what their deal is, but the issue is at the margins. For example, if the planning board came up with some way that got approved to restrict having a house and the ADU on its lot both be student owned, for example, but that I take to be more of a marginal case at this point. But I take, your point is well taken, and I guess we would be kind of spurring and joining the conversation. Although I understand that Nate would want to have something done within the next couple of months. Is that not the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more a question of like something starting at the planning board and going up to council, like zoning stuff does. But Gaston, I think in basic principle, my understanding of the state law is you're right. Like, regardless of, and some towns won't pass anything. I think Amherst eventually will, just so we sync with what state law is. But as of today, you can build them by right in most. I think the only exception would be extremely small lots where setbacks would literally, crush into each other. But other than that, I think it's viable now, and it's on the town to catch up. February 2nd was the launch date. So,
Alex.
Yeah, I wanted to echo Carol's point about waiting on more information for the ADU bylaw and wondering if this is premature. Because I think the other piece that's that I'm thinking about is, from my understanding, the town's original ADU bylaw as written was mostly to encourage the development of completely detached ADUs. And that is not the same definition of ADU that's utilized within the state bylaw. So if we're having an event about this, I think we need to make sure we're being fair to all forms of this potential development. I'd also wonder at this point, without more information, how much hosting an event or helping facilitate an event like that really does or does not align with our charge. If we're still not sure about what the implementation of that looks like, or what the actual cost or feasibility of that is on a larger scale, I'd question if it's a good use of our time and resources to work on hosting that without more evidence that that actually does directly have results that are affordable housing for the town.
Alex, can you just clarify what's the nexus that you don't see between spurring the development of ADUs and the trust's strategy and mission?
Just looking nationally, there's not been much that seemed to happen with any correlation between ADU development and affordable housing options.
Yeah,
that's
that's the
not what
problem.
ADUs tend to be, at least from what we've seen nationally. So unless we find some data that clarifies that connection for me, I'm still gonna push that that's maybe outside of our charge. What ADUs have seemed to be nationally is more of investment rental properties that are at or above market rate, that don't seem to have much of a tilt towards affordability. I mean, even thinking about the event that we went to with the UMass Design Build, that was a very small home. It was not necessarily very like frilly and fancy in terms of finishes. It's a much higher per square footage development cost than other development strategies, especially looking at standalone ADUs. So I'm still not sure what the connection is between encouraging development and thinking that that leads to affordable units on the Amherst housing.
Sorry, I'm freezing here. I missed your comments. I don't know if anyone can hear me.
I can hear you.
We got you, Gaston.
All right. Yeah, sorry. I'll try my phone's Wi-Fi. Go ahead, Carol.
Well, I put my hand up and you're not there to see me, so I'm gonna just talk.
No, I can see you. I can see you.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, no, I forgot what I was gonna say, saying all that. I thought that at some point when we were talking about ADUs, what we were talking about was, could we come up with something like, here's a plan for an ADU that could be, that the town would already approve, and if you did it this way, maybe it would be able to be affordable. If we did something like, but that takes a lot more work than we're going to possibly get done by any springtime presentation of anything. I don't even know if it's possible yet, but I thought that's what that we had some kind of maybe
All right.
pie in the sky ideas, but so that we're so far away from being able to do anything like that, that I guess with Alex, I'm not sure what we would do in the spring.
All right. Well, it sounds like we got to revise and resubmit at the development subcommittee level. So does anyone have any other initiative that they're excited to have us do anything with, Grover?
Hi, sorry everyone, I'm driving, so awkward, but I just wanted to say I'm on the subcommittee, so it's a little like Gaston is also speaking for me, but what I know about communications is that we can't say something once to people of the town and be like, that was adequate. So I personally don't think there's anything wrong with having an event, which when if you hear Gaston talk about it in detail, like I did in the subcommittee, I felt very excited about the possibilities of what it does to get people who are ADU curious in the room and start having conversations and exchanging information, because the process of building an ADU is very time intensive. So having the initial meeting, an exchange of information, I would imagine would just be an early step. And then if we were able to say coordinate with the town for a design that would breeze right through, then that could be a second touch a year or two later. So just saying that I hope that we could consider it as something that we can do to increase the development of more rental homes that isn't necessarily tax credit affordable housing. So.
Thank you, Grover. Thanks for overriding me. I appreciate it. Allegra.
So I, as a member of the education committee, I do think I like what Grover just had to say, and I was kind of formulating in my brain before, we haven't talked about this in the subcommittee yet, but I think hearing the cost per unit to build brand new affordable housing, I'd like to kind of think about other ways of getting affordable housing and maybe having a series on that, whether it's having the community land trust come and talk about their model and anything they have in the works, or how to support them and getting more people to donate their houses or whatever it might be. But I think ADUs kind of could fall into that. I mean, I'm imagining that, I guess maybe I'm conflating like ADUs and tiny homes, but maybe those are two separate things that we would talk about under this umbrella of not going through 13 different lenders to build $600,000 units after lots of opposition and many zoning board meetings model of affordable housing, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, and we need that as well. But I think part of what that conversation had me think about was expanding our understanding of how to achieve affordable homes, that maybe there's a home right there that's not affordable to a family yet, and maybe the way that we make it affordable for a family is through down payment assistance, or through let's partner with the land trust, and so that was my like pie in the sky idea of like maybe a little education series that we could do, and then partner with the development group on something at least specifically around ADUs. But I do also like the idea of what Carol was saying, and I kind of remember that conversation as well, and I think that would be helpful to suss out a little more.
Thank you, Allegra. Erica.
So first of all, I'd like to appreciate Alex for giving us a sense of what the trends and the data or studies may show. I think that's always so important, and I was a little surprised. So Alex, thank you for raising that. But at the same time, I'm thinking about there's also a goal to keep people in Amherst. And I know that there are individuals who feel that they want to downsize and that there are not a lot of potential places for downsizing. So an ADU might be a place where they actually move into and then rent out their home, or they might be a family member who needs a place to stay. So I think when we think about alternative opportunities, and I think what Allegra, what you just stated in terms of the different types of alternatives that we can think of here for Amherst, for all different situations, in terms of being a senior who might want to go move into an ADU and have a smaller place, and maybe have children who want to move into their homes to get them back to come to Amherst. Or in my situation, having an older parent who really needs a space to create an ADU that's close enough. So I don't want to lose the ADU, even though it might not impact affordability, but it might also address the whole issue of maintaining the long-term cohesion of neighborhoods and as opportunities to downsize that a lot of seniors are looking at, or even families who the children have gone off to college and thinking they want to stay and possibly keep the house for their kids when they come. So I like the idea of thinking future-wise to at least give people that information, and also then thinking about tiny homes and land trust as well. So.
All right. so I think we've got some kind of reasons to consider this and reasons to dig a little deeper. How about we take all the feedback and consider it in the development next subcommittee and see if we can sharpen the pitch and go from there. Does that seem like a reasonable next step? Grover, you want to how does that, what do you think of that as a way to move forward?
That works.
Okay, all right, good. But I guess let me take the opportunity to I guess underscore that we don't want to just be waiting for people to come to us to say, yes, we can help you. We want to be generating affirmative action by our own will. And so, you know, we're volunteers here, we're committing our bandwidth, and at the margin, a little more bandwidth and commitment might actually produce some initiatives. And so I guess I'm summoning you all to kind of tap into your imagination of what you want to kind of harness our energy to do affirmatively. All right. Items not anticipated. Anyone have things come up that, oh, we wanted to talk about the email list. Alex, please.
We can start with the email list.
Yeah, so Carol, you want to just kind of tell us what the issue is here?
There may be more than one issue. There may be more than one issue, like I can't ever remember my microphone. Anyway, I have this list. John started it, gave it to me when Erica and I became chairs. And since then, I've kept it up, meaning when we've had an event, I've added things to it. Sometimes somebody doesn't have the job. There are different reasons why things have been subtracted from it. Now that there are 3 subcommittees, for instance, there are different, more ideas about when to send something to it. Is it just advertising the housing production plan meeting? Is it for our meetings? What is it for? And who should, and I don't mind keeping it and managing it and trying to keep it updated. And I actually think that even if it doesn't live on my computer, if somebody wants to put it somewhere where everybody can reach it, it still ought to have somebody whose responsibility is to keep it up. But it also maybe needs us to think about what we want to do with it. So routinely, I would always send it out with, here's the next meeting coming up of our trust, and here's materials, whatever they are. But now there's more things. And so I think the issue to me is balancing, here's this list, it's a great list, people want to know about what we're doing, but people get so many freaking emails, we don't want to send out too many emails or nobody's going to look at any of them. So how that's kind of balanced itself up until relatively recently, when it seemed to me like, oh, I just sent one and now somebody's saying send this one. And so that's my story.
The first thing, thank you, Carol, for not only keeping the list and adding to it, but for being judicious about its usage so that people still open those emails. But I take the issues. Greg, what are you thinking?
Thanks, Gaston, and thank you, Carol. I learned a couple things, just sort of policy wise, and I think a little bit of history is relevant as well. My sense is that the birth of that list, or the inception of it, was when there was a coalition effort that was, in the formal sense,
That's
outside of the auspices of the trust, so not a public body, right? And I think stakeholders kind of merged, is my sense, and so maybe organically, like, it just sort of became an echo of trust meetings and that sort of thing. There may be advantage to keeping it in that informal space, and my understanding is, like, if it's not coming from me, even if it's a trust member, you can take an independent action. Best practice is to always use BCC and not share the so we don't want to send, and I don't even I think Carol, you do that when you've sent, but keeping it outside of the auspices. The other advantage to that is, one piece of guidance I got was that if we start having a formal like notice list for the trust other than like the town calendar, which is the formal meeting notice, and we get agendas up on the agenda center that that show up on the trust website, if we have a separate list, then that creates an obligation and another, whether informally or perhaps formally, like it creates a certain expectation among recipients that like, oh, I didn't get the email or whatever. And so it's, it formally embedding it in the trust might have a downside in that sense. So yeah. And then also too, like there may be, there may be potential for a reanimation of an effort outside of the auspices of the trust, where this might be a useful resource, to help support. So yeah, that's kind of what those are
it is certainly not my goal to make it be more formal and have to have more requirements and more other hoo-ha about it. That's not the point. I would just like some guidance maybe, and if you don't want to give me any, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. To know, how to balance the two things I said.
I mean, first of all, it sounds like you're making good judgment calls, Carol. Second of all, I think that the members here who will be most likely to want to use that is the education and outreach group. So I wonder, Carol, if you could put that on a Google Doc that you share with Allegra. And so Allegra also has access to the list, but doesn't use it without, checking in, or so I've started a proposal here. Can someone finish it?
What if, well, my proposal is that Allegra and I get to talk about it or something or other, or I go or something. It doesn't really have to be especially formal, does it? We want a way so that the education committee can get benefit of the list when they need it. And I bet you that we can figure out something. Allegra, you should say something because
and so this is like my fault. I brought it up to Carol and then I had no answers or ideas for what would be best. But I guess I hear Greg's point that like perhaps a formal list that might at some point have to be like open meeting law, or like how did you get on the list and I'm not on the list and it's a town list. Don't want that. I do think if there was, say, an event that we wanted to publicize, that would be a point where I could reach out to Carol and say, hey, can you send it out to the list? I mean, I guess thinking forward to, I believe, a few members, including Carol, might be, sunsetting their time with the trust. Is it this year? Like in a few months?
Middle of this year, yeah, presumably.
So I guess perhaps the conversation would then be, is Carol going to spearhead the not formal out of the trust's purview, but still loving affordable housing community effort? Or is it
Carol, this is for life. Are you
right?
This is for life. You can't let it go. You're like, this is like Survivor, the guy who pushes the button every 10 minutes.
Or is it something that, this list belongs to the chair of the trust now, and then it's on Gaston? Tag, you're it. Or again, I mean, as the current education chair, do I take it on until my time on the trust sunsets and then the next person takes it on? I guess the question would be like the continuity of the list holder versus the role, formal or informal. And
May I propose that Carol, you email me and Allegra and we figure it out? Does that
Okay.
does that work?
Works for me. Allegra?
that's fine. Yeah.
All right, no objections, anyone? All right, we'll keep it alive. It makes me think of like the mother that you use for kombucha or something. You got to keep that yeast alive.
Sourdough starter.
All right, Alex, please.
Yeah, it's not for tonight. It's something that I'd like to see on a further agenda, but I want to put it out there that it's something I'd like to discuss. I'd be happy if we could have a conversation about where we're meeting. I know that this body has been meeting virtually for a while, especially as we're looking to fill the vacancy. I understand a lot of flexibility with virtual meetings. I would also encourage people to think about challenges that can come up with virtual meetings, thinking about internet access, privacy, and spatial constraints as we're trying to attract a diverse group of people to apply to fill this vacancy. So not a tonight conversation, but I'd be very happy if we could have that conversation at some point about investigating an in-person or a hybrid meeting style.
Thank you for raising it. It's actually something that I think we're waiting for the state, for the legislature to tell us what we can do at this point. Allegra, Carol, are you speaking to this? No, okay. So I understand we're going to get some guidance from the state because the provision that we're working under is not perpetual. It has to be renewed. So we are going to get some feedback. The other thing I'll say is that on the license commission, we came up, because the license commission met twice a month, we came up with a nice balance of alternating. And we also saved the naughty conversations for the in-person session, which was also nice because it didn't end up in a Zoom recording. So I think we can be creative here, and we may have this feedback, but I agree. Let's talk about this at our next session, and hopefully we get the guidance from the state by then as well. Is that Greg, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I kind of figured it was a governor's declaration that gave us the permission to meet remotely, but in fact, it was tied most recently to legislation. The extension of the allowance is currently in this Municipal Empowerment Act, which doesn't seem like the state legislature will swallow whole by the end of March.
Okay.
So either they'll break it out, or it is conceivable we could be forced to meet in person in April. That's not out of the realm of possibility. So for your radar, it's worth throwing that in.
I think they'll get a revolution if in this from municipalities, but
it would be disastrous in my mind. But
yeah.
We'll not
see.
that meeting in person is bad. I like meeting in person, but
we never see disaster in government. I mean, all right. So your hands are from before. Does anyone have anything else that we did agenda? Oh,
it's not
go ahead.
From before, it just wasn't about that topic.
Okay,
I don't know what Allegra's is. Maybe go ahead, Allegra, you're first.
So I wasn't sure if now we were talking about future agenda items, but it did pop into my brain that when I was talking with Tim McCarthy of Craig's Doors about some of the stats for the forum, he said if we ever wanted to have him come talk to us as a trust, feel free to do that. So I don't know if you want me to reach out to him or whatever the future agendas look like, but that is always an option. And perhaps maybe when we get closer to an understanding of the VFW proposals, that could be a good segue for that. So
excellent. Greg, you've got that on your running list?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Excellent. Erica?
I'm sorry, Carol was next.
Yeah, Carol. I don't know how you got in front of her in the queue line, but
well, whatever. I just wanted to say, I mean, Allegra pointed out a moment ago, I think it's three of us, Allegra and me and Rob, who have served so many terms that I don't think that we will get renewed. And that comes up sometime the middle of this year. What? Erica, didn't I just say that?
No, you say it, Allegra.
Sorry. I've just been talking to Allegra too much. Anyway, Carol, Erica, and Rob, right. And so I want to encourage all of us to find people who want to be on the trust and then to work to encourage the town to do the interview. So it's not just that we're missing one person. I don't think we'll leave until there's a quorum. I don't intend to leave if it means there's no quorum, unless somebody actually kicks me off and says you can't come. But it still would be good to have to get that in the works. Make sure that we have some good people applying, and so there's good people going forward. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. I wonder if is there a very cheap method for us to advertise this? Like, can we have a little subtext on the meeting announcements, Greg, that says we're looking for new members?
That's a question for Carol, I think. But yeah, yes. I mean, in that, like, the meeting announcements go to the, we could put them in the agenda, we could
put in the agenda. Maybe we'll
we could put it on the website
for this purpose.
Yeah, I can put it, I can embed it on the webpage.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Erica.
So just to respond to that, George Ryan in his district newsletter, he's District 3, but I'm in District 1 and I get the newsletter, and he's always putting in there that that the town's looking for volunteers for committees and has a link right to it. And I also have somebody who just moved in next door who might be interested as of June. So absolutely, let's just keep on talking to people we know, because I think the personal contact will be really important. And I think we also, we had talked in the past too about diversity in terms of age, ethnicity, et cetera. We really need to also think about that with the three of us. I think we're almost the same age, all leaving. But Carol, Rob, and I leaving, and the wealth of experience too. When I listened to Rob and Carol, is just amazing. Anyways, but that wasn't what I wanted to do a future agenda item really quickly. I know this is probably alarmist, but I think we should have a forum about how to think about retrofitting your homes around fire issues or the areas, hurricanes. I mean, we're seeing climate change that is just, horrendous in what's happening, and we don't want to wait. And people say, well, there've been no fires, but there was a Leverett fire for 5 days a few years ago that wasn't put out. There've been fires all over Massachusetts this past summer. We're in drought conditions. So I know that there is actually a lot of discussion in articles online how to boost your property and your home, because any property destroyed is less beds and less housing for us. So something for future to think about.
Yes, and I mean, related to that is home insurance, which is affecting people. I'm sure there are other stories in the group. All right, good. So if anyone has like specific ideas of people who would be good experts on this question, let's please share them. Excellent. So I guess we have gotten through our agenda. We've got our next meeting March 13th. And best wishes to all the subcommittee meetings. And let's figure out how we make some little fires turn into good. Let's make some housing. And it's going to be very sad to lose the three of you, Erica, Carol, and Rob. I hope it doesn't actually happen as soon as you say. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Okay, second. All right, all in favor? Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.